All right, you're very welcome along to live rugby here. Brian O'Driscoll is here with us this Friday. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
It's bright and sunny outside.
Yeah, so we should really fast show and then get out and
glorious.
Yeah,
absolutely glorious.
We've been slagging Dave all day. He's decided to pack the guns away for some reason.
Yeah, Dave gets slagged for not wearing long sleeves.
If you
and
do
then he
the
gets
work,
slagged for wearing long sleeves.
what's the point of doing the work then?
That is an argument that some would forward, yes.
Yeah,
But,
might as well.
I don't know, I have the sleeves rolled up. It's the best I can do. We're just going to have to move on.
Once you hide the gut, you're grand.
Speak for yourself.
There was a pinch under the table there. I'm not sure everybody got to see. But anyway, let's move on. There's a couple of things to talk about. We'll talk about the game. Obviously, we'll talk about last weekend as well, the Leinster-Munster game. And the Ireland squad was announced this week. And of course, there is the continuing Joey Carbery saga. The only reason I bring this up today is that there's a full-page ad taken out in the Examiner by Ronan O'Gara in his column today, which is basically saying, come on, Joey. I mean, the fans really want you. The players probably a bit less so, but it'll be great down there. You get to play with Conor Murray all the time. Most of the time. Some of the time. That was it. Don't go to Ulster.
Yeah, well, listen, it's a strong argument if you're Ronan O'Gara, if you're anyone in Munster. We were talking about it on the road show a few weeks ago when we had Leamy, Horan and Quinney in and talking about the 10-year anniversary from their Heineken win, and then they like I barely finished my sentence when Leamy jumped on it saying we'd absolutely love to have him down in Munster. So yeah, it looks as though it's inevitable that he's not going to be a Leinster player next year, and they'll feel that if they can get him down for a year, they might be able to keep him and turn him.
It's not exactly a new departure. I mean, they have a Leinster man playing 10 already for them, so it's not a huge deal for Munster fans to be able to suck up. But the line that O'Gara's peddling, that players aren't a piece of furniture or a piece of meat, ultimately they really are. Like, this is a business. These provinces, this union, they're trying to make money. They're trying to further the interests of the international team. Like, you hear some of the stories about the way some players are treated, the way they're overtrained at times. Like, really, they are pieces of meat in the end, are they not? I mean, you're forgotten very quickly once you retire.
Yeah, you are, and you can be forgotten pretty quickly when you're injured or you're out of form.
Yeah.
So
yes,
yeah,
they get pretty well paid, but at the same time, I mean,
But that's why the whole loyalty thing is almost a thing of the past.
Yeah.
If a player stays with one club for their career, it's because it's been lucrative enough to do so, rather than do you know what, I'm going to play for less because I'm happy here, or I'm a one club man.
Yeah.
That's not true to form anymore. Even from my own point of view, it worked out on all levels. Financially, at home, didn't have to move away. My boyhood club, where I was from, so everything worked out. But if one part of that is out of sequence, then you absolutely start looking elsewhere. And yeah, it was, I did do a bit of Dutch auctioning back in 2004 to see whether I could get my numbers up with Ireland. But when I did go back in 2006 and no one knew about it, back to France, I was seriously thinking about it because I needed to win something. I needed a chance of winning something. And I didn't feel that was present in Leinster at the time until Michael Cheika came in and we had that year where we got beaten by Munster in the semi-final. But that gave us hope and gave me hope and thinking, do you know what, we can eat at the top table, but I needed that, and that loyalty's it hangs on a thread at times.
The one thing that they've introduced obviously since then is the fact that if you go away, unless you're Sexton or maybe Tadhg Furlong, we're not going to pick you.
Or Conor Murray.
Fair enough. Yeah.
It was probably only those three.
Everybody else would be like, oh, okay, off you go. Have a couple of years and come back and we'll see you. But in the meantime, we're going to bring players through. Like, that's the one other thing that they have in terms of loyalty. But even now, if they start moving players around, like, that disappears really quickly. And I just wonder if there's unintended consequences of that, where you suddenly find yourself forced to work in an environment that isn't your chosen one.
Well, that's what's going to happen here. That's ultimately what's going to happen with Joey Carbery. He does not want to leave. If that conversation did not take place with Joe Schmidt a few weeks ago or last month or whenever it initially happened, he would be only too happy to continue to grow and learn from Johnny Sexton, compete with Ross Byrne. And yeah, I don't know, even with Joey, you'd need to ask him, does he want to play 10? Does he want to be a 15? Or where's his preference? Personally, I think at the moment, obviously he's very little experience this year playing 10, and as a result, you're thinking he's a little bit looser than you might ordinarily want from your 10. But I think his skill set absolutely lends himself to being a 15 as opposed to a 10. I think he does need time in that 10 jersey, and I get it from Joe Schmidt's perspective. If he wants him to be his number 2-10 in the World Cup, he's got to play there a lot, because there's holes in his game at 10. We've seen them. He's had a couple of performances with Leinster in the 10 jersey, and they haven't been anything terrific to write home about. But that's, I can understand that, because you need time in that jersey to bed down and get fluency into your game, get that game management that we've seen from Ross Byrne. And I've been incredibly impressed with him and his development over the year, but he's had lots of game time.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's like Ross Byrne is in the Ireland squad completely on merit, and he's there. And if you were picking a team on the basis of the last 2 months to face Australia this weekend, there's a good chance Ross Byrne is in that 23 as a second choice 10.
I agree. I think I was very impressed. The variety to his game, his kicking game is strong, probably one of the strongest parts of his game. But I was really impressed by seeing him taking the ball to the line, having a little go himself, looking for offloads in behind the line. He's a nice passing game. I just think he has really come on this year. And he's more in the mould of where Johnny Sexton was when he broke onto the scene.
Yeah.
And, I've said it many times, I didn't see Johnny Sexton evolving into the player he's become from that first year. I thought he was going to be a very proficient 10, but, he's added so many other elements to his game and strings to his bow, and he sees it quicker than nearly every other rugby player. But maybe Ross Byrne has the capabilities of doing that. He's certainly in that mould, and which is very exciting from a Leinster perspective, of having Johnny coming to the winter of his career and having a young guy learning from one of the best around, and hopefully taking over from there too.
You'd wonder, and you would hope, that Ross Byrne has gone to Stuart Lancaster and Leo Cullen and asked them, why am I not in the 23 when it comes to these big European games? What is it that I need to add to my game to force you to rethink whether it's Joey Carberry or I that is going to be in, say, the match day 23 for a Champions Cup final? And then he's trying to add whatever they have told him to his game, and suddenly Joey Carberry's going to be on this, or Ross Byrne's going to be on the same flight as Joey Carberry to Australia. It's a very real problem now for Joey Carberry.
This is a huge tour now on with Ireland as to see what's going to transpire.
Yeah.
And it'll have an impact on what happens. Say the status quo remains the same with Carberry staying put.
Will that call have been made by the time they play that first test on the 9th of June?
I think it'll be made next week.
So
I think a decision one way or another will come. You can't do it while mid-season. No. You can't have it running on either where.
So if he refuses to go,
can't be playing.
Does that
clearly in their
influence
head.
Joe Schmidt's thinking when he's picking the bench for that first test? Is he thinking, we gave you the opportunity, we told you were the number 2.
Well,
told you what you
Simon
needed to do.
that.
Yeah, what does Simon Zebo say? Yeah.
Yet you've refused to go to Munster. I think we may have to start looking at Ross Byrne now.
I think he's looking at Ross Byrne anyway. He's going to give him game time. He's going to get capped. He's going to want. He's lost Paddy Jackson. He was his go-to after Joey Carberry. Ian Keatley has not had a good end to his season. He's been pretty good in parts, but then disappointing towards the end. He's not playing for his province. I don't know if he's seen as their number 110 next year. That's why they're looking for Joey Carberry. So I think he needs a third 10. For the World Cup next year, he's going to bring Joey Carberry because he plays 15 and 10. Yeah. So even as a third choice 10, he's going to bring him. So does he need a second 10 playing international rugby and getting experience 15 months out? Without a shadow of a doubt. So you're going to see, whether it's the first game or not, but Ross Byrne's not going on the tour to bed in and get an understanding of what the Ireland squad is about on tour. He's going to play one and probably be involved in at least 2 tests.
If you're Joey Carberry and you're thinking long term, there's part of you that obviously wants to be in the team for the World Cup, but that doesn't at the moment look realistic, and you want to be in the matchday squad. That might not be possible if you don't get game time. But in the long run, you could be first choice fullback at Leinster or first choice 10. They certainly, the Leinster hierarchy sees you as that. And if you're playing in those positions, reaching your full potential, you're going to be in the Ireland team more than likely if you're that good. So if you're thinking beyond the short-term immediate problem that Joe Schmidt has, then maybe the right thing for him to do is to ride out this pain with Joe Schmidt now and see what happens 3 years, 5 years down the line and become the player that you want to in the place you want to be.
Yeah, the funny, like, again, you got to ask Joey Carbery what he wants to do position-wise. Does he want to be a 10? Does he want to be push Johnny Sexton out in time in a year or two, and who knows how long Johnny's going to go on? Or does he want to go and compete for that Ireland jersey down in Munster? I think what's strange too is, as much as when he was being touted to go to Ulster, you know, this season-long loan.
Yeah.
It's a poor fix for Ulster or Munster to just get him on a season.
Yeah.
So maybe they're both thinking we'll get him for a year and you know, he'll buy into us. But say that he just go for a year and gets to the World Cup and gets game time, they're back where they were, you know, 12 months previously, where they're still looking for another 10 to build their team around, and particularly Ulster, because well, not necessarily particularly Ulster, but Ulster, you know, had Paddy Jackson in situ for a number of years, and now they had Leila Fano come in. He worked well, but you've got to have someone really for a 3-year period, so even if it's a foreigner, so you can build components around them.
Because if he does brilliantly at Ulster/Munster for a year, and everybody goes, "Oh, that's amazing, it's great," and then he leaves, it's a failure ultimately because you haven't managed to keep him. If he goes and flops, you're going to get the blame for this amazing talent that has come. So it's not really a win-win situation for anybody here, except maybe Joe Schmidt. He's the one who wins from this.
Well, the win is that if Joey Carbery plays really well, buys into Munster and stays put, and is a real find for them. So there's an upside to it too, but you're going. It'll take a fair bit. I don't know Joey Carbery particularly well, so you know, to go in against your will is a bad footing to start off.
Not a great start. Your teammates would find that out pretty quick, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Where you know, he'll be a good pro, and but if you're not 100% dialed in to being somewhere,
especially Munster,
you can't play your best. Your biggest rival.
Yeah.
I think it's a really tough play, and I think we will get a decision imminently after, you know, very soon after the final, because this can't drag on. You've got to call it one way or another.
It's been very public. That's the issue. This, like,
we all know what Joe Schmidt wants, and if he doesn't get what he wants, Joe Carbery stays put. Joe Schmidt's going to be asked then, you clearly wanted this move to happen, it hasn't. Where has this left your relationship with Joey Carbery?
And Leinster.
He has to go. He has to go.
This is awful. Like, it's a terrible situation. Like, someone like you, who's got so much experience, saying he has to go. Like, this guy is still young. Like, he's going to have to leave home. He's going to leave his family, his friends.
If he has his Irish aspirations, he and Joe Schmidt wants him to go. It will take a miracle year. It'll take almost an injury to Johnny Sexton or a real lack of form at Ross Byrne next year too for him to get that game time at 10 and play his way into, you know, win Joe back over again, because you don't want a black mark. I'm not saying Joe's someone that never forgets, but against any national coach, irrespective, you don't want to get on their bad side.
I haven't seen anybody get out of his doghouse yet.
We have 15 months, out from a World Cup.
Yeah. He's. I'm just looking.
He's holding all the cards.
Yeah.
If Joe Schmidt's so desperate for Joey Carbery to be getting game time at 10, why didn't he start against Italy this year, for example? Why didn't he play against either South Africa or Argentina in November? I know he did carry an injury into the November series. Will he start one, if not two, tests? I think
they'll all start one.
Okay.
I think that's what'll happen.
Like, he needs to be playing test rugby.
You have to start with Murray though, because it's not fair otherwise. Like, you know.
Well, you'll
you know,
oh yeah.
Who gets the chance to play with the full team? Who gets that 8, 9, 12, the first choice?
Yeah, well, it'll be, if John Cooney plays, he'll get Sexton. You know, so you got to play experience with the newcomer, and then Marmion with Marmion's got enough experience. He can play with Joey, so maybe Murray with Ross Byrne.
Yeah.
There we go. There's the teams for the halfbacks of the three tests.
I wanted to ask you about Tygburn as well, because obviously we haven't had a chance to see him play for Ireland yet, and hopefully he gets an opportunity on this tour. What was he like? You would have played with him?
Yeah, he was on the injured list a lot in the early years when he was in the academy, but he had an edge to him. Him and James Tracy used to be not whipping boys is not fair. What's the best term is, the annoying factor of, in opposition, where you'd be going, maybe 40 or 50%, easy clean outs because you don't want to get too attritional at training. But the two boys always weighed in with, almost 100%. So a coach might have a quiet word in their ear going, I need you to, slow ball up today and be a nuisance. And they were only too happy, the two, Tig and James, to play that role. And both very good over the ball. So then, things got ramped up. You realise it on the first phase when they go and pinch the ball or, we're a bit of a nuisance. It was like, oh, really? 40's just gone to 80 and then still a nuisance. And that's how rows start, where players are thinking differently. But I think that's the winner in both of those two. They've managed to play their way. The hard route, James Tracy has been a little bit longer at it as well. Maybe has taken a bit of a circuitous route into the Irish setup and had to play the long game. But their doggedness and their ability to stay in the fight because they want it, is what stood to them.
This is one of those things that's going to happen increasingly in Irish rugby as the vast number of players come through from the academies. A bunch of people are going to have to go away and play in France and play in England and come back. And the benefit of it is that there's so many jobs out there for them. They're coming from such a great setup in the Irish academy system and the Irish underage system that it's fertile ground for those clubs in England to come looking for players, and eventually if they're really good we get to go, come on.
But the real negative for them as well is, and I don't know from what I hear and what it's hearsay, but Tig Burns had to take a pay cut to come back to Munster. That may not be 100% accurate, but from what I'm hearing, he's had to take a bit of a pay cut from what he was being offered with Scarlets.
Right.
So
doesn't he make that up playing with Ireland though?
Potentially, but it's you go away, you haven't been picked up in your academy, you go away and you earn your crust somewhere else, and then if you want to play internationally, well, you got to go back to Ireland. That's almost an unfair route. Whatever about the guys that make it into the international team through one of the provinces, then they know what they're doing by going elsewhere, as Simon Zebo, for instance. Whereas if you go the other route, Tig Burns should have been picked before this summer tour. But Joe was making a point of not selecting him during the Six Nations, even though he was in some of the best form, of any second row in Europe. But he was waiting until he was officially finished with the Scarlets to be able to select him for this tour. So,
of course, if he did bring him in, maybe we don't look upon James Ryan as we do now after the most ridiculous season. And
that's it. Dev Toner and James Ryan and Henderson were all playing really well. But you're definitely on the form of this year. You're putting Tig Burn in that conversation undoubtedly.
And he's also one of those people who, like Scott Fardy, gets in the matchday squad because he can play in the back row or in the second row, and in the World Cup, when the injuries happen week 3 and week 4, it's like, well, you're straight in the team.
Coaches love to carry 2 back rowers where one of them plays second row. That's where Rhys Ruddock is a version of that too, but he can't play second row as effectively as Tig Burn can. So that's where he's the beauty of playing, in the row and back row will get you in the 23 on the best team being selected.
Rhys is obviously not in the Ireland squad, but is in the Leinster team, which is pretty impressive because Fardy's on the bench for Leinster against Scarlets. So obviously there's room. I guess he does cover both positions, but Leinster rate Rhys Ruddock unbelievably high as for the intangibles as much as for what he does on the field of play. And it looked like Joe Schmidt always rated him really highly as well. So maybe he's just giving him a rest this summer?
Injury just came at the wrong time for him. He was so unlucky. He was in such great form in November, and then he had that long layoff. It was a hamstring off the bone, which it takes a long time to get back from. And I'm sure he's not, no matter how hard you work, he needs that match fitness. So I think with Jordy Murphy's rise as a result of that injury, Josh van der Fleer's, Sean O'Brien's, he's come to the fore and playing out of his skin. I think he's just being rested because there's only so much petrol left in these guys' tank. And I think it's clever bringing someone that's hungry, that has an appetite, who hasn't played a huge amount of rugby. I think likewise with Conan, his injury a few weeks back came at a bad time, and that's why Jordy was able to play. It was a quarter-final, semi-final, and
Final,
final. Yeah. Where Conan was the man in Jamie Heaslip's absence all year at 8, and I thought Conan was excellent last weekend too, and fully deserved. I think that's just an appetite to. You missed out on a start in the Champions Cup final. Will you get one in this? So deliver for me. And I think that's just playing the squad really well. I think it's really clever from Leo and Stuart Lancaster.
Yeah. All right. I did want to just show you a photograph. You had a pretty nice week. When I saw this, I was like, make sure you find somebody who looks at you the way that Brian O'Driscoll is looking at Pádraig Harrington in this photograph. You're like...
I will pick up any tip that's going. and Pádraig is never short of a few. So... any steer whatsoever.
And notice, Keith, what is the only guy holding his putter? Was he the only man to find the green?
Quite likely. He was good. He was good. He was a bit intermittent, where he might be out of a hole, but he was smashing down the throat of flags on. Certainly, he looked professional in 5 or 6 holes. I sure hope he doesn't hear that.
And is it true that you messed with the mind of Pádraig Harrington over the 18 holes to such an extent that you're responsible for the 6 over par round he threw in yesterday?
He wasn't brilliant in the Pro-Am either.
Okay.
No, he wasn't at his best. But he's an unbelievably generous pro in Pro-Ams. And I think he's got a reputation for it, of lining up putts. And I think what speaks volumes, we weren't even doing particularly well. And on our last hole, which was 16, and the crowds were gone. There was no one left. He was still, I think Woody or someone had a birdie putt, and he was still up lining birdie putts up. So I think for me that really typifies a pro that has other things on his mind. His own game wasn't in great shape, but he's still willing to give to us and give us our best day. Yeah. I think that those things stick with you, because I've been in some pro-ams where the pro couldn't care less.
Yeah. It's kind of why do I have to do this today?
Yeah, it is. It's like, it's a necessary evil, I know.
You've all had shoulder reconstructions. Can you still play golf after that? Is it totally fine? It doesn't matter?
Mine's fine, yeah. I wish I could blame that on my golf, but no, it's all good. There's no issue with torque or anything. There's very few. There's 1 or 2 things, actually. Lifting weights and doing guns, I can't. It doesn't. I can't get the weight around the same way I can the left side. But that's just to do with my bicep tendon as well.
Because you badly broke it.
Because I snapped.
So no impact, and no kind of long-term, medium-term impact on any of that.
No. And that was I took 6 months, where now Robbie Henshaw is back in a little over 2. Now it's done differently. He was done through keyhole. Mine was sliced and diced. So, and there's a lot. Yeah, it's no matter what, it's got to be a longer process. Yeah. But also, I probably could have been back in 4.5. And Jimmy Colville, the specialist, was like, no, you're taking 6. And it was the best advice I ever took. Yeah. Of just that extra month and a half of rehab to get another 10 years the other end.
Yeah, and also like to be able to play golf properly and not be kind of...
All those things. Quinny, Alan Quinlan, dislocated shoulder in 2003 in that game against Argentina. He called himself the saviour of Irish rugby, scoring a try in a really important World Cup game. And his isn't right, because he came back after 4 months. It just shows that extra little bit of time and care. Geez, it's a long time to live after being a professional.
It is, that's the thing. Let's talk about the game on Saturday. From Leinster's perspective, would they have preferred somebody else other than Scarlets, given they've just beaten them and they whooped them? And
I think so. It'll be... I think were the bookies giving 11 points to Scarlets
this time? Yeah,
I think they were. That is, wow.
He's very big. Although we said something similar before the semi-final.
Yeah, but this is different. This is different.
Europe.
This is different. They are, the way you play after you've been embarrassed. Humbled is a bit strong, but they'd have been embarrassed of getting to a European semi-final and then never firing any shot, never being allowed to fire any shot. So they will come absolutely gunning for Leinster this time round, and expect some feisty stuff. I think they'll be in for the fight. So I think it'll be a very, very tight game.
Yeah. From Leinster's perspective, what do you do in that circumstance where you expect it to be tight and yet you're better than them? Like, that's a weird mindset.
Leinster have the luxury of knowing that over the last few weeks that they've won games in multiple different manners. Grind against Racing when they weren't at their best. I think that's the satisfaction. Wasn't a great game, but the satisfaction of still being below par but getting the job done, of rolling your sleeves up Dave style and getting properly stuck into it. And then Munster, they still weren't. They weren't brilliant against Munster. They looked a little bit tired, but they still had the resolve to get see that through and just nudge themselves in front and give Munster too much to do with 5 minutes to go. So
it felt comfortable. I thought the Munster game was
but they could have lost it at the death.
Yeah.
Were you not standing up jumping at the TV too?
We've had this conversation before.
It's all Ireland off the ball, so you're a neutral. But I'm
a Leinster fan.
I definitely didn't think it felt comfortable. What kind of a game are Leinster most likely to win tomorrow? Like if it's another arm wrestle, is that their best chance?
I think if it is an arm wrestle, I think they're going to be better at an arm wrestle. Yeah, but then we saw them play that expansive game against Scarlets and put them to the sword. So
they've played an awful lot of rugby since then.
Yeah, but they've got this freshness in. I think that's that makes a big difference. I think they've got Lowe back in. They've got Larmour. He's got to have a big game soon. He's got to get a bit of ball. He hasn't really seen it the last few weeks.
No.
So he hasn't had a go at it.
Levy had a week off.
Levy the week off. Sexton. Carney.
It's just that every time they went to it in picture in the semi-final against Munster, that there's 8 guys in their suits all sitting together in the stands, all of them fit bar van der Fleer, and you're just thinking like this isn't even close to Leinster's best team.
No, it's not. But we're not seeing Leinster's best team tomorrow either. No Robbie Henshaw. But I think it's important too from a squad and morale perspective that you do have those changes come in, that squad players that have done a phenomenal job in Europe that didn't get to maybe start in the first 15 or didn't even make that 23-man squad, that they get a little bit of love, because James Lowe has been really good for Leinster throughout the Champions Cup, and he didn't get into the 23. You've got to reward those players for doing a good job, and sometimes you do have to think squad. You do have to think about energising them and rewarding them for a great season. I think that's why you see the likes of him, the likes of Conan starting, and Rhys Ruddock coming in. I think it's massively important that they feel the love from their coaches, because they've done a great job, and just bad timing in many of their cases has stopped them from having a starting jersey in the Champions Cup final.
Ross Byrne, obviously, not in the 23.
Yeah,
he's like,
such a tough break for him.
Squad. Like, I can't play matches. Like all the big games at the end of the season, he hasn't
2 finals, and he doesn't
that's
sniff.
tough. That's tough, because he's played over like 1,200 minutes at 10 or something like that. Yeah, and he's been he's one of the ones that's really unfortunate to miss out, because his performances this year have been worthy of being in a 23 on a final day.
Issa obviously came off at half-time in the last game against Munster. He's just about making it to this last. It's kind of like slowly tapering down.
Yeah, I saw him last night, and just because he's so mentally tough, that he'd be able for it. But yeah, adrenaline is going to be his drug of choice this weekend, and he is. I don't know. He wasn't overly honest with me, but he kind of said, "I'm fine." Just 2 more days. Yeah. They were his words. So he'll manage. He's the sort of guy. He's a Sean O'Brien type, or a Robbie Henshaw, where he doesn't need to have played a huge amount. If he's comes back from an injury, you just know he's so much football and so much enthusiasm and so much drive that he'll perform. And I know he's played a lot of rugby, but that strong mentality will get him through it.
Was it 2011 when you played Ospreys? Was it after the Northampton final?
Yeah.
And it was a really high-scoring game. It was a really open game, so tight. Was there a point that day where you kind of felt, I think we're out of juice here? Or was it like, what was the dynamic? What was the feeling amongst the squad? Because they're in a very similar position now in terms of the amount they've had to pour into the games mentally and physically in the last month.
Yeah, that's what is really remarkable. It's the emotion of getting back to that emotional state, and it counts for so much. And that's why I thought Munster had such a brilliant shot last weekend, was because they were so pumped, and Leinster, had the high and the adulation and everything that comes with it, and you drop after that. The body relaxes a little, and they had a couple of nights on the jar, not 4 as some media are reporting, but so they had a couple of nights.
One of the nights did stretch into the early mornings. Kind of counts as 2. But then to then ramp yourself back up and still put in a credible performance the way they did, I think it's remarkable, and that's the evolution of that team. Yeah,
that's what makes them so impressive, is not only the way that they've managed to get it done different ways, but also still getting up to that mental state to be able to produce a good enough performance against sides that are so raring to go. And they've got another huge test because Scarlets are going to be so hungry. They're going to be as hungry, if not more than Munster, to come over and prove that semi-final was an anomaly, and that last year
was much closer to the truth.
Was where they're at.
Yeah, because it did feel like a completely out of nowhere performance from them, almost like the semi-final of the European Cup was just that one step too much for them, that they didn't quite believe that they were ready for it yet. They're clearly going to believe they're ready for Pro14 final because they've done it before. You mentioned Rob Kearney's in the team again this week. Kearney, like a year ago, was nowhere near as solid in his position as he is now. He's put together 12 months of...
Don't know if it's even 12 months. You go back to just before October, which is eight months ago maybe. Like we were in talking here, and I was asked about the Ireland back three in advance of November, and I talked about Earl, Stockdale and Zebo on form and just from an attacking perspective. And what's really interesting about Rob Kearney is his ball handling and his catching and kicking is always excellent. That level has never dipped. His counter-attacking has been reasonable, but he's had that year without scoring a try for Leinster or Ireland. Like, that's pretty remarkable that we're talking about him and crediting him with a very impressive rise back to the form that we saw in some of his best years.
Yeah.
And yet he hasn't gotten on the score sheet. So that speaks more volumes for the calibre of the game and his defence and everything that he's put together and the leadership that's been involved, to not be getting the headlines as everyone sees in the papers at the weekend, where Kearney scores winning try. Or, Kearney gets a brace. He's no tries. So he'll love me saying that. But I think that's all the more remarkable that he's had a great season without getting over the whitewash.
He obviously is looking at the World Cup and thinks he can make it that far. There's no signs of him slowing down at all. The thing is that when you get to a certain point in rugby,
just on that, I do, so I am quite friendly with Rob still. So I talk to him a bit. I do know that it's the first season in about 4 or 5 that he's felt really great physically, and had very few niggly injuries or carrying something, and he feels like he's playing with a freedom as a result of that.
Well, that's the difference, isn't it?
People don't know those things, and everyone carries injuries, but I think he's got a renewed enthusiasm because nothing's holding him back. And I think we're seeing that in the way he's playing the game. Yeah,
so we should stop writing him off and just kind of enjoy him while he's there.
Yeah, he'll be one. Is he Ireland's greatest fullback? Well, he's the most decorated Ireland player of all time. He's telling everyone, but it's he's got 4 Six Nations titles, 2 Grand Slams. The lads are really getting into him about only having 3 Heineken Cups because he missed the one in 2011. So he's only got 3 of them only, but. Yeah, he's a phenomenal. He's been involved in all of Ireland's big games. The All Blacks, man of the match when they won on Soldier Field.
Yeah.
He's consistently been around for all 5 games in the 2 Grand Slams, 2 of the 3 that we've won in our history. So, yeah, like we should enjoy him while he's still there, because. Like lots of other players, you don't realise what you've had until they're gone.
Yeah. He's no real room for error, though, does he? Like we could easily be back in a similar position in the eve of next year's Six Nations, where I remember the quip he kind of threw when he was asked about Jordan Larmour and the build up to the France game. Well, I kind of see him as an out and out winger, which is what he said when he was asked, as opposed to him putting pressure on him as a fullback. If Larmour explodes into next season and lights things up maybe from the wing in the Champions Cup for Leinster, we may well get to next year's Six Nations and Kearney's been asked the same questions all over again.
I don't think so. Because I don't think Jordan Larmour, looking at Jordan Larmour's kicking and catching game, that's not good enough to be a starting fullback for Joe Schmidt. Joe knows what he's getting with Rob Kearney. His counter-attack, is it anything like Larmour's? No, it's not. But it's proficient enough. His defence is very good. His positional sense is very good. His catching and kicking is the best in the world, or in the top 2 or 3 in the best of the world fullbacks out there. So I absolutely think Rob Kearney has to fall off a cliff not to be the Ireland fullback for World Cup next year.
One quick question about Munster before we wrap up the club stuff. There's been some talk because they got it to within a score against Racing and they got it to within a score against Leinster that they're right there. They're close enough to both those teams. I'm just not sure about that opinion.
Do you know what was for me, what was most evident last week when I watched the game back again was the skill set. Skill set of the two, and the skill set of the forwards in particular. I know that the backs threw a lot of shaky forward passes, and they were all guilty of it. Hanrahan, Scannell, Zebo, Arnold even threw one. So that's your whole three-quarter line and your full-back throwing forward passes. So straight away the knock-on effect of turnovers and scrums and line-outs, you can get no concerted pressure from those types of errors. But I was really disappointed with some of the skill set, except for Peter O'Mahony. He threw that beautiful pass, that really flat pass right on the money that created space out wide. I really think that you compare a Devon Toner to a John Klein, the way they pass the ball, the comfort they have, with the ball in hand, I think they're a world apart at the moment. And I think that's probably where the Munster coaching ticket, where Johan van Graan is looking forward to a pre-season, because it's a pre-season full of skills. I think even Jack O'Donoghue has nothing on a Jack Conan or a Geordie Murphy. They just have a lot more comfort on the ball. They've more time on the ball. They're not rushed into making decisions or passes under pressure. And that for me is the big differentiation between the two packs.
That's where the second tier of players in the squad needs to be much better when the superstars are off with the Ireland team in November, that the standard is so far below what Leinster's is at the moment. And that's why you don't want the story about Munster's season to be, they're right there, it's so close. It's like they're not. They really have to have a full, honest appraisal. We weren't in the Racing game. We weren't really in that Leinster game until the last minute.
But it just shows as well to where you get to semi-finals, and then the best teams are another level up from the also-rans.
But only one team can win these competitions.
No, they can't.
They've got
but
back-to-back Champions Cup semi-finals. They've got to a Pro 14 final, or 12 as it was last year, a Pro 14 semi-final this year. Yeah, they look on the face of it like they're still a good bit away from winning these competitions, but they found themselves in the last four in Europe in each of the last 2 years with all sorts of problems on and off the field.
But to win Europe in particular, to win, to get into that last 8, you've got, and now the new 20-team competition under Champions Cup is even more competitive. Before in the Heineken Cup, you had the odd limp team that would limp in that really didn't deserve to be there. That doesn't really happen anymore. You've got 8 good teams. So they had to beat Toulon, but it gets tougher and tougher and exponentially tougher, semi-final and again final. And it is the cream rising to the top. And to do 3 big games like that, I don't know if they're there yet. And they're able to peak for one, but then you get a better opposition. You don't get a great draw away in France. But they were put to the sword in that first 30 minutes against Racing, as they were against Saracens. Saracens should have beaten them by more last year.
Yeah.
So I think they're be really competitive at semi-final and final level. I think they still have another way to go.
And it's across the board. It's not just the number 10. That was O'Gara's point today, is that them reaching 10 semi-finals in a row in the Heineken Cup as it wasn't because he was a brilliant out half. It was because they had a full team that were all. I look at
the front 5 of their successful teams. You've got to get that grunt work done, and you've got to have a good scrum. Paul, Donegal O'Callaghan, Flannery, Hayes and Marcus Horan, those compared to John Klein, Billy Holland, Scannell, Cronin or Kilcoyne or Archer or John Ryan, for me they're a world apart, the calibre of the two. And I don't think that front 5 is, when it gets down to the nitty-gritty of big European semi-finals and finals, I don't think they're going to compete with the best teams.
All right, give us your prediction for the Leinster game. Sounds like it's like a squeak of a Leinster win.
Yeah, Leinster by 3.
What do you think is going to happen?
I just have a little bit of a concern. I think Scarlets are really coming to play. And although I felt a little bit better when I heard about some of their issues off the back of the 4G surface in Glasgow. Like they
John
really
Barkley
weren't. Barkley's gone as well. They weren't really able to train properly for a couple of days with burns and blisters and all sorts of treatments that they had to get. So that'll have softened their cough a little. But I just think that you're definitely certain that Scarlets are going to produce a performance. So can Leinster produce their performance? If they do, they win. But if they don't, I think Scarlets could win this game and maybe win it with a bit to spare if Leinster just can't get down to that well again and see what's left.
All right, well, the sun is shining. We're going to let everybody go out and enjoy it. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.